The 90s was the start of some major technological advancements. Microsoft's Windows 95 and the World Wide Web helped the computer change our everyday and work lives. You could somehow also have a phone on the mobile now too. These electronic devices were becoming less of a fad and more of useful day-to-day technology. And I know it doesn't sound like much today, but this was a big deal back then. This new technology also included the automotive industry. While the 80s famously popularized the idea of a turbocharger, the 90s started another revolution: hybrid technology. While electronics could be used to call your grandma in another state or email a work colleague across the nation, it could also help power your car. This start took the form of a hybrid motor to either add horsepower or help gas mileage, or maybe even both. The rebirth of the hybrid powertrain, since they were technically around in the early 1900s, was in its infancy for the automotive industry. This was started by our favorite car to be behind in traffic, the Toyota Prius. It was teased in 1995 during the Tokyo Auto Show before going on sale in 1997. Toyota mass-producing a hybrid vehicle was a huge investment from a huge brand. Once people saw it, it wouldn't take long for the boom to start inside and outside of motorsports.
You know how every single hybrid car has an electric motor and a gasoline motor? I want you to forget everything you know about those and marvel on the earliest hybrid race car out there, the Chrysler Patriot.
In 1992, engineer Ian Sharp joined the Liberty Technical Affairs, a department within Chrysler, to investigate a new material called carbon fiber, whatever that is. Inspiring him, he spent weeks making a proposal to the head of engineering, Francois Casting, about the potential development for a hybrid Le Mans prototype. The insanely hard to understand yet successful approval was at the Detroit Auto Show in 1994, so bear with me here for the technical details. Featuring a hybrid electric powertrain, it would have a two-stage turbine generator, meaning that it had two different spools within the turbine. One of them was the high-pressure chamber to get the most power, and that was attached to the second low-pressure chamber to get the scraps via the same shaft. The high-pressure turbine could only extract so much power, so the low-pressure chamber would make power out of whatever the high-pressure chamber couldn't make power out of. The system would be running on a fuel source called liquefied natural gas, and at peak power output, the shaft would be spinning up to 100,000 RPM. On the same shaft that the turbine would be powering sat a three-stage alternator, with the shaft spinning the alternator's rotor. As the shaft spins, the rotor would produce up to 525 volts of AC power. It would also feature a cooling jacket for the needed heat control. From there, it would go to a rectifier to turn into DC power, then to an inverter to turn back into specifically tuned AC power. That way, when the 525 volts would be sent to the electric wheel motors, it experienced smoother acceleration and precise torque. Those electric wheel motors, by the way, described as traction motors, would be 4-pole, 3-phase induction motors rated for up to 24,000 RPM. Then it would get fed through an 8-to-1 ratio gearbox, then finally to the differential, and then the wheels. The hybrid part of this comes from a system called a flywheel hybrid. In a vacuum enclosure to reduce windage and friction losses sits a carbon fiber flywheel that was magnetically mounted. When the driver would lift off the throttle, the traction motor would switch to a generator mode to farm the energy from the wheels, like a KERS system. The motor would then send power to spin the flywheel. On top of that, any extra power that the turbine would create off throttle would be sent to the flywheel to spin it as well. All of this power would get it up to 58,000 RPM. When the driver would go on throttle, the spinning flywheel would be used for its power and be sent to the wheels. All this power control from the turbines, wheels, motors, and flywheel would be controlled by a vehicle management controller using a lot of sensors. The whole system would weigh an insane 1,150 pounds. Alright, that was a whole lot, but that shows just how advanced the concept was at the time, especially considering this was over 3 decades ago. Engineer Casting had to say this about the program. When it comes to forcing technology and engineers, nothing equals the pressure cooker of motor racing. Going back 40 years, motor racing helped invent some of the technology that we depend on today for safety and emissions, such as disc brakes and fuel injection. We still believe there is a vital role for racing to help push technology where it's needed. Chrysler has been anxious to go back to top-level racing for some time, but we wanted to send 2 specific messages when we did. We wanted to be able to reconcile our research on environmental issues with racing, a subject many people have talked about. And we wanted to use racing once again for the purpose of developing all new technology that will test the creativity and ingenuity of our people. The Patriot lets us do both. The chassis would be built in England by Reynard, folks making open-wheeled chassis for kart and various other series. They plan to enter it in IMSA's New World Sports Car class, competing against machines like the Ferrari F333 SP and the Riley & Scott Mark III. However, that would never happen. The car had 99 problems and the flywheel was all of them. It would either make the surrounding casing super heavy with a lot of shielding in case it broke, or super light for it to be competitive. Remember, this is a carbon fiber disc spinning at 58,000 RPM. If it failed and tore through, there would likely be so much shrapnel skyrocketing everywhere. And this, in fact, unfortunately came true. During testing, it would fail and kill 2 engineers, which was confirmed by dyno operator Richard Samuel. He made the claim that while the car wasn't ahead of its time, it was just the ceramic technology that was behind of its time. The flywheel is the bulk of why they couldn't race it, and if they were to race it, it would lose the essence and marketing potential of the branding that it was a hybrid. The potential of this concept was huge though. An almost identical system would be later used at the Williams Formula One team to test their 2009 competitor. And while this car might not have raced, it had the right idea, and had it got a little bit more time to develop the flywheel, there might have been massive results. Another man who was keen on making this hybrid work was Dan Panaz, owner of automaker Panaz, surprise surprise, and the son of entrepreneur Don Panaz. He wanted a foray into racing. Don was a huge figure in American sports car racing, such as forming the famous Petit Le Mans event and American Le Mans series, but his son Dan was the founder of his sports car company. Add that with the GT1 class that we all know and love being in a complete boom around that time, he made his grand opening into racing with his car, the Panaz Esperante GTR1. It was co-developed by Reynard Motorsport, and this incredibly American machine was a uniquely decent competitor. Its Roush NASCAR V8 and one-of-a-kind front-engine placement made it an instant fan favorite during the weekends. 6 of them were built in 1997, and it performed great that year in North America, bagging 4 class wins in IMSA, however only a single podium in Europe's FIA GT Championship, and a row of DNFs and 24 hours of Le Mans. David Price Racing, the 1995 BPR Global GT champions, ran the cars in FIA GT competition. After that one podium finish for 1997, they decided to temporarily pause the racing program at the start of 1998 to develop a hybrid model for that season. They would be developing it with the factory Panaz team, so it would be run under Panaz Motorsports. Adding on to this pioneering decision was Bill Gibson as well, who would later found Gibson Technologies. They had their driver lineup set for the legendary race as well. British touring car champion and previous Le Mans runner-up James Weaver would be paired with ex-Formula One driver and future Top Gear Stig Perry McCarthy. Remember how I told you to forget everything you know about conventional hybrid motors? Bring it back here. Panaz would be pairing up with Zytec Technologies to prepare this hybrid machine. The car would run a brushless DC motor, and German company Varda would provide the 300-volt, 260-cell nickel-metal hydride battery pack. Powering the battery would be a KERS-style regenerative braking system. The whole battery pack would weigh a whopping 220 pounds, not counting any of the other systems, but the system would bring the total output to a thunderous 800 horsepower. Test driver Christophe Tensot recalls the experience in a later interview. The battery was developed by Varda. In the beginning, they wanted to use a nuclear battery in the car, but it was extremely dangerous and forbidden by regulations. When the Varda engineer installed the battery, he evacuated the box and then put on an astronaut suit. He installed the 180 kilogram battery and a carbon box next to the seat. We spent the entire year exploding batteries. It was fantastic. We had a big weight handicap as the regulations allowed us to use all imaginable and possible refinements. ESP, ABS, traction control, we had it all, so the car was very easy to drive. Handling and braking were incredible. Even in the rain, it was easy. This project was too much of a precursor to be viable. It would take years to develop all of that. The car made its debut at the 1998 24 Hours of Le Mans with a vibrant livery on it, purple with flashy yellow lightning bolts running on it. And as much as I want to tell you how good it did, it was actually incredibly slow. It got eliminated in the second practice session. The way things worked back then for Le Mans was that there was a certain amount of spots on the grid, and each spot would have to be fought for based off of lap time set from each car. There were 9 cars battling for the last 7 spots in that afternoon session, and unfortunately, the Sparky did not make it. The reason for this was because the hybrid motors were so heavy that it slowed down the car a lot. Total weight of them came out around 350 pounds total, and the payoff that they got from the extra power and the fuel mileage did not account for the extra weight they had on it. After Le Mans, they decided to take it to the inaugural Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta for a hopefully better result. Forming an all-new driver lineup would be the legendary John Nielsen, Le Mans winner and JGTC champion, along with a competitive American Doc Bundy and Pinot's test driver Frenchman Christophe Tinsel. And they achieved that better result immediately because it was actually able to race. However, things would go much differently mid-race. About an hour in, the battery exploded on them. It wasn't a big explosion or anything, but they had to carry what was basically just ballast as they had a dead battery in the car. While it might have finished P12 overall, it actually secured a P3 out of 5 GT1 competitors, beating out the other Pinot's entry and the factory Porsche 911 GT1 entry that did a backflip. After that, the car was retired, leaving Pinot's to move on to develop their new Le Mans prototype car for 1999. This Pinot's did what it needed to though. It made its mark. This would be the foundation for the next hybrid sports cars that would enter the arena, and while it wasn't the perfect foundation, it had a lot of time to be perfected. During that boom, we set our sights into Formula 1 in 1997. Adrian Newey's amazing ideas just rocketed the Williams FW19 to the Constructors and Drivers' Championship with Jacques Villeneuve. Riding off that high, he was signed for the McLaren team for the 1998 Formula 1 season. Using that prowess, he developed the McLaren MP413. Being the lead chassis designer, one of his amazing ideas was the radical idea to run the car with hybrid motors. Working with engine designer Mario Ilian, the two designed and ran a small Kurz-style battery engine for use in 1998. Small motors were put on the car to build regenerative energy when the car brakes. By the driver hitting a push-to-pass button, the energy stored in that battery would power the pumps that the belt would normally control, this being pumps for oil, water, etc., and would not give power directly to the wheels or power shaft. Because it would send power to the pumps, this would help reduce parasitic losses, thus giving more power to the wheels. In early development, they calculated an average of 0.2 seconds per lap of gain. They got it cleared and ready to roll by the FIA in winter before preseason testing, having it installed on only one of the cars. McLaren had their lineup of David Coulthard and Mika Hakkinen to test and drive the car. During winter testing, Coulthard noticed that the car was unreliable but fast. When they showed up to Melbourne for the first round, their pace was immediately shocking. A 1-2 pull with Hakkinen edging out Coulthard by just 0.04 of a second. While Schumacher's Ferrari was able to keep up for the first couple of laps, his engine blew on lap 6. This allowed the McLarens to take it away, lapping the entire field on their way, and leading Hakkinen to win the first race of the season after team orders would let him. In the next round of the season at Brazil, McLaren once again swept qualifying and the race with 1-2 finishes all around. Ferrari quickly lodged a complaint, surprise surprise, and while it was mostly about their trick braking system that they were running as well, them and Williams probably also mentioned the hybrid system, claiming that it went against the one-motor rule. Because of their points, the FIA made a decision to ban the hybrid system that they were running. While they allowed it in preseason, they went back on their decision and promptly banned the system. It didn't matter much though, as Hakkinen went on to become a driver's champion and McLaren went on to become the constructor's champion. But regardless of it being banned, McLaren was a decade ahead of its time with their Kurz technology. The 90s was a clunky time, not only for the internet and mobile phones, but also hybrid systems, especially in the motorsport world. With the first ever debut being on a car that didn't even qualify for the race it was meant for, that being the Pinot's Sparky at Le Mans, it was not a good start. While the initial idea was there, it seemed like it would take decades to develop the system. However, it would look up. That same car did finish in 12th position with a highly competitive field around it at Petit Le Mans. On top of that, hybrid support was already taken and deployed by McLaren Formula 1. Getting 1-2 finishes for the races it was entered in, Adrian Newey's expertise with hybrid motors is an amazing feat. Since it's the start of a new technology, it's going to be clunky, that's a given. the internet wasn't filled in a week and Rome wasn't built in a day. However, with the right amount of money and the right amount of investment, it seemed like it could take off at any moment. Thank you very much for watching. This was a super fun video to look into, and especially because I'm a big fan of the 90s, I loved researching it. So stay tuned for the next installment of the series, and like every other day, make it a great one and drive safe.